Hello, my name is Makeda Mahadio, and this is a CNBC Africa special panel. During a Shared Value Africa event here in Kigali, Rwanda, we moderated a panel conversation outlining the challenges, benefits, and nuanced details of using the shared value business model. The model itself is in essence committing to making profit with purpose. That is identifying, addressing, and providing solutions for social issues while making revenues and growing a company. On the panel, we spoke to the Regional Head of Regulatory and Scientific Affairs for Nestlé, John B., the CEO of the KCB Foundation, Jane Mwangi, social entrepreneur and CEO of Water Access Rwanda, Christelle Kwizera, and the CEO and founder of the Shared Value Africa Initiative, Tiki Barnard, to get their take.
As time passes, it's becoming more and more evident that in this global economic climate, business as usual is not sustainable. It's becoming less and less sustainable. So how can looking at social impact or social need change the way that companies do their business?
Societal needs present a great opportunity for business. It's really having businesses change their mindsets and really see that it is in their interest to solve the societal problems. Because what that does is to unlock business opportunities. And I like giving good examples of when we just do CSR, quote unquote, the traditional CSR that we know, oftentimes called philanthropy or just called social responsibility. What normally happens is that we just give relief. When you think about how often, businesses have gone in to respond to, say, a calamity in a community. There are floods, and you see businesses all ganging up and mobilizing resources to go and solve a problem. There is drought. They all get together. We all go and we solve a problem, but temporarily. That is so much relief. But when we look at those challenges as businesses and we start saying, how about we go to that community to intentionally address that problem, then what happens is that opportunities open for business. We love to say that money follows solutions. So problem is good because money follows solutions.
I'd like to point out two examples, especially within the Rwandan context. Yesterday, we met with Sina Gerard, and you might have noticed, if you love passion juice, that almost all of Kigali is out of passion juice because we didn't produce enough passion fruit. The one guy who still has enough passion fruit is Sina Gerard. And of course, he's proud of it. He's like, well, my farmers will still sell me the passion fruit. And if you're familiar with his story, the way he worked with his whole community, give them seeds, irrigate their lands, educate their kids, there is something about business creating shared value that creates loyalty and secures your value chain. So that's one example. And I'm thinking of Regis as well, who's doing an amazing bread called Vita Bread. And he's sourcing from different farmers to produce this bread from orange fleshed potatoes. And you're familiar with Diego's story, how he's now accessing markets worth millions of dollars, but he's only farming is almost 1% of the fraction of the chili he's selling. And so the way, especially in farming and the whole agriculture value chain, if you don't invest in your value chain, invest back in your value chain, you're not secure as a business. So, and those lessons can apply everywhere else. So what we heard today about the banking sector, how are you gonna bank people who don't have money? But if you invest in those people, then you're creating future clients. So business does definitely have a big thing to gain in securing the value chain, creating loyalty. And it's almost like creating a monopoly for the future by investing in people early on. You're looking at a long game and one that's gonna be way more profitable than just trying to suck blood out of your market without reinvesting anything.
Right. This model is a long-term strategy. You've mentioned it in your speech, Tiki. In your consultancy with your clients, how do you encourage them to stay the course?
When an organization decides to start this shared value journey, because that's what we call it, it's a journey, because it's like going into a new relationship and getting married. And when we look at organizations' strategies, it's very, very difficult when an organization wants to change their strategy, because we know that. I mean, an organizational strategy, if you think about it, it's a big job. It really is a big job. And what we're saying to organizations, if it looks too big at the inset, let's look at your organization. We try and identify one of your material issues as an organization. And we create a shared value initiative around that, so that you at least have proof of concept when you speak to the shareholders or when you speak to the management from that perspective. However, if you want to get involved in shared value as an organization, the CEO have to buy into it. It's got to come from the top. It really has to come from the top, because we've worked on initiatives where we've done it, started with middle management from a corporate citizen perspective. We looked at sustainability and everything, and then if the CEO doesn't buy into it, everything falls flat. So it has to come from the top. It's not an easy job. I can say that to you straight away now. It takes a lot of commitment, but if you do the right thing, the money will come.
How can adapting the shared value model create a competitive edge?
Well, I think that we've had a fair bit of experience of doing precisely that. So the example of micronutrient fortification, we know that there are 2 billion people on the planet who are deficient in one of 4 major micronutrients. In fact, sometimes it's a combination of more than that. By systematically fortifying some products that are in daily use, especially in Africa, like Maggi cubes, for example, you can address part of that societal problem and at the same time create a competitive advantage for your brand. So, we have other brands. We have a breakfast cereal brand in Nigeria called Golden Morn. We don't just fortify, but we work with farmers to address some of the food safety and aflatoxin contamination issues. So we work with them on storage and good agricultural practice. We trained in the 7-year period about 81,000 farmers, half of them women. They double their income. Our factory gate rejection is down from 50% to 2%, means we don't have to import anymore. So everybody wins. So there's a competitive advantage, built into some of these practices that we've seen as we've implemented it. And just I'd like to say another thing. You talked about CEO buy-in. It also helps with shareholder buy-in, because Jane was talking about philanthropy. At a certain point in time, if you're a publicly listed company, it's not your money to give away.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you are creating shared value investment, you're investing in the future success of your business at the same time as you're solving a societal issue, and that then becomes more appealing and sustainable from the financial investor's point of view.
We've seen or we've heard stories today from different industries already: banking sector, water, food stuff. Can any company adapt this model?
I think that there's no other solution. Any company can adopt this model, because we have a responsibility from a business perspective. We really have a responsibility to create economic value and create social value. So there's no excuse for any company to not actually create economic value and create social value. And it can start from an employment equity perspective. It doesn't have to be a very big project that you start with. You've got, what we always say from a shared value perspective is that you have to start at home. So you have to start internally. You have to get your house in order before you actually can move into the outside world. And that's very, very important, because if we're not paying our employees enough, how can we expect them to actually go into, how do we then create a community that is more prosperous if we're not paying our suppliers properly, if we're not paying our employees properly? So the shared value framework is built on 3 pillars. Firstly, it talks about reconceiving new products and markets, and that's what John was talking about, what they're doing in Nigeria with that product that they've created. And then the second one is about the supply chain. And supply chain is such a big part of business as well. So it is about supporting, about re-looking your supply chain, about how you work with them. And then the last pillar is about clusters. And that's the one thing about shared value. We cannot work on our own anymore. We have to work together. It is about private-public partnerships. That's what we have to do. We've got to create them. If we want to scale big projects on our continent or in our countries, we have to look at the PPPs, and we have to work together. And not even the PPPs. John was talking about it, and Jane was also talking about it. Ecosystems, that's what we do. We create these ecosystems because we need each other. And we have to reach out to each other so that we can work together for the benefit of all.
Is there a certain amount of balance that creates a good shared value experience? And by that I mean, we've seen companies who maybe didn't have the best of intentions use social issues or identify a need somewhere and exploit that for profit. So they've managed to use that for profit, but this is different. What's the main difference between that kind of example and what shared value is?
A tough question, but let me give it a shot. It's important to have a blend of everything, within the shared value. And what it is we have done ourselves as a foundation, as a corporate foundation, is to have 3 buckets. Like we have taken all the programs that we run and we have put them in 3 buckets. There's a bucket of philanthropy. So out of the 100% that I get, I allocate about 5% of my efforts to philanthropy, because it still has a place in the society. It's still required. Then I have about 15% of my resources going to corporate social responsibility. It still has a place. And then I have 80% of the resources going to shared value initiatives. And so within that, I'm therefore able to respond to any of the 3. It's where I know that all efforts are going towards shared value. It's not a touch and go. It's long time. It needs a lot of patience. We use a lot of blended financing. And in blended financing, we talk about grants, we talk about equity, we talk about debt, a combination of the 3 to see how the results will look like. Then I know that there will be problems I have to solve in the society that are touch and go. And that's where I do my philanthropy. But I also know that there is a space of my being socially responsible as a corporate within the society. If we are we are also very big in construction, because we have a whole department that is SNL, savings and loans, where we do the mortgage. And if we go and we do a lot of digging of the quarries, we will want to fill them up, because we want to be socially responsible, just to make sure that the community does not become a victim of what it is that we are doing. And so I don't know, I'm hoping that I have answered your question by saying that it's really a whole blend. It's like when you're baking a cake and you have to know the ingredients. You will put so many ingredients and you must know the measures that allows the cake to finally come out right.
So I just want to add to your cake, Jane. So we often get asked, if we now are talking shared value, so what happens to corporate social investment, what happens to corporate social responsibility, or what happens to philanthropy? We cannot do shared value if we don't engage from a corporate social investment perspective, from a philanthropy perspective, because shared value is an inclusive process. Does not exclude anybody out of the process, and there will always be a space for corporate social investment. Often people are saying to me, "But isn't shared value corporate social responsibility?" Because that's what often comes up. Corporate social responsibility, when you look at it, is regulatory. What you have to do is you've got to be sustainable. You've got to pay your taxes. You've got to pay your salaries. You have to, pay your dividends to your shareholders. So those are all, and you have to protect your reputation as well. And you've got to ensure that as an organization that you don't create any risk in the societies that you operate in. So that is corporate social responsibility. Shared value is a business management strategy. That's what it is. And it includes corporate social responsibility. It includes corporate social investment, and it includes philanthropy.
So you don't need to separate the two.
No.
If I can add something again, coming back to your question is, can it be flashy? Can it be just something that's passing by? I think actually traditional CSR has more potential to be that than shared value. Because if you really get to the core of shared value, you are going to see business return from your investment into the community. So if you do something that is just for the cameras, that's just flashy, it won't really have the return that you could have gotten by truly investing in the community. An example came to mind because I come from a background that looked a lot at big NGOs and their big failures, and that's kind of why I found my balance being a social entrepreneur. Think about, was it $300 million that were given in Haiti for the construction of houses, and only 17 houses were constructed. And the whole project was a complete failure. And now put that on the side of an entrepreneur who wants to provide affordable housing. And they get that money, and they have to make a return on that money, but they're trying to provide affordable housing for somebody who can't afford the housing, so it has to be really low cost. So they must at some point secure a return. They must really create a shared value within their project to have a return as a business. So I feel like actually shared value has the potential to keep businesses from doing that, for going for the cheap credit, but rather make really targeted investment that will receive more return in the future. Because traditional philanthropy actually creates more opportunity for short selling the community.
Right. Is that the reason why you decided to go for-profit company for your initiative, for water access?
Yes, definitely. I didn't want to be an NGO, and I was too scared to be a traditional business. I wanted to find a balance somewhere in between. But as we progress around this conversation, we actually find we have more potential to make more money. I'm going to give you a quick example. Everybody's worried about climate change and our emissions into the air. So I'm wearing a badge that says ambition 1.5 degrees Celsius. And the world's biggest investment portfolio that invest, especially in coal, oil, and petrol, have all committed to go carbon neutral on their portfolios by 2050. It sounds out of this world. How are they going to do it? They're making emissions. But there's something called offsets, carbon offsets, to where you can, because we're emitting on one global planet, right? So if I'm unable to reduce my carbon emission in my side of the world, in my side of operations, I could reduce emission somewhere else and be able to balance that out. So Water Access Rwanda has benefited from that carbon market, as we call it, where we have right now 23,000 people that get water for free. So these are the very poor communities. They get water for free, water that is pure. We test it every month. We make sure their source keeps working. And what they're doing is they're stopping to boil their water. So when they don't boil their water, we cut down less trees. So we're sequestrating more carbon and reducing carbon emission.
Do you think that this is reflecting in the access to finance for companies? Do you think that companies that use the shared value model can have an edge in terms of going to banks for loans?
Yes. Yes, definitely, because there is, first and foremost, there is a competitive edge. Companies that are doing shared value, they definitely have competitive edge over others. If they have competitive edge, then you know that they have higher results. If they have higher results or higher profits, then you know that they're able to repay their loans. They're more stable, they're more sustainable. You know, the sustainability component makes them very attractive. And then, of course, don't forget that a lot of banks, banks like us, like ourselves, have also, we have also signed up to the SDGs, the responsible banking. And as we look at responsible banking, of course, you're first looking at that responsible enterprise, or that responsible entity that is coming to you to borrow. And if it's doing shared value, it's already responsible. It's already adopted to the habit of responsible profits. And so therefore, they become more attractive to any financier. So if there are two of them coming to the table, pretty much close to exactly what Christabel has, Christella has talked about, the water, the one that is, carbon free, it attracts more people. It's the same thing even with the finance industry, that entity that is coming to borrow, and it's socially, it's looking at social impact. Its cost higher. And so if I have to make a choice between one because of limited resources, that's the entity that I end up favoring.
I just want to add to that, because what we're going to do next year is we're going to have voluntary certification of shared value organizations, because the whole vision for the Shared Value Africa initiative and creating organizations, or getting organizations to buying into shared value, so that if there is an opportunity to work together from an ecosystem perspective, is that you don't, as Jane just said, if you're a shared value practitioner, you already have looked at what from an internal perspective. You've looked at your employment equity, you've looked at your supply chain. So you already have a reputation as a trusted and an organization that looks after governance, that treat the environment, that you've already looked at it from a sustainability perspective, you've looked at your environmental strategies and everything. So that organization already is recognized as a company that is creating social impact. And that's what we want to strive for, so that if there's government and big PPPs, and government have to sit down and have a look at all of these proposals that they're getting, it is almost like a no-brainer to say, if this is an organization that is a shared value practitioner and has been recognized at one, we don't have to do that in-depth analysis to try and find out if they're suitable for this project or not.
John, towards the end of your presentation, you spoke about the AFCFTA, and you kind of touched on how businesses using shared value can benefit from the CFTA. But how do you think that shared value can help to build a successful CFTA?
In essence, it can help remove some of the concerns. So if it provides a framework for responsible business behavior as we liberalize, it can somehow make the process a little bit more comfortable, because it's not going to be about the race to the bottom that some are fearing that the CFTA might bring about. If business, as it gets involved with the advantages of the CFTA, is doing so in a way that consciously and systematically creates value for the societies it increasingly serves as it grows, then that should provide a comfort factor for the regulators, for those who are those who are observing and making the rules on this. I'd just like to say one more word about why this is important. And it's about attracting and retaining talent. Because if you are not a business with purpose, then you're going to have a very hard job in attracting and retaining the best millennials, especially, to work for your organisation. Because they want usually more than just a regular salary right now. They want to know that the organisation that they're working for delivers a purpose. Okay? So I think that if you're looking for justification why an organisation should invest in that, you need look no further than that. If you can't look towards the long-term payback on a shared value investment, look towards attracting and retaining talent.
Christella, at the last summit that was in Nairobi, the Shared Value Summit, you mentioned that you want to work in other countries as well, not just Rwanda. What opportunities do you think the CFDA is going to present for your company?
Yeah, so we've created a model that is quite scalable. Anywhere you can find groundwater in Africa, we can be there. But what's different is, again, all the different regulations right now, different standards. We have countries like Burundi that don't want to charge people for water, yet they don't have the required public funding to provide free water. So navigating from Rwanda, where they want private sector to play a bigger role in providing basic services like water, and then moving to a country where your market is being killed by the government you're trying to help, it proves to be a challenge. So with the CFTA, at least it's gonna, it has the potential to standardize a few things or to open up new markets to where then people like us who want to see ourselves as a Pan-African organization, who don't see just ourselves as Rwandans, but as Africans, and move with the same shared value perspective in other countries, can see governments recognizing that and then agreeing to work within a bloc, then it's easier for us to scale and implement. Where it plays a very important role. Right now, if we go try to get development financing, their deal sizes sometimes are way bigger than one market can assume with one go. And your target market probably has to be scattered before you fill out the whole market. So with the CFTA, then I can plan for all of Africa instead of planning for one country at a time, and then be able to access more financing and have a broader reach and perspective for the money I get, instead of trying to saturate one market and then the next one and the next one, when I could have an easier time going for one portion of that target market in all of Africa, and then the next portion in all of Africa. So it provides better scaling strategy and better use of financing mechanism, especially major development financing.
Provided, of course, that there are mechanisms for those barriers to be addressed.
Absolutely.
Because if those aren't systematically addressed, I think what I was trying to get at in my last part there was there's also, as we implement, the risk that there will be even more barriers created. So there have to be mechanisms. There is at WTO level, but I don't think there is right now formally a technical barrier to trade sort of platform to raise some of these barriers.
Yep, and I think the vision of the CFTA and the energy it's creating, especially among Africans and how we work with one another, already that's quite a huge push for us. So we can engage people in that conversation. There is some hope that things will be different. So I think already with that vision, with that energy that we're getting, definitely can help things right away. But as you pointed out, there's dangers. If people are starting to be like, well, we're part of this thing, but give us 15 years to be fully part of it. It's like, come on, don't slow us down. But there will be some advantages there and things we can push at least from one sector to the next to see that we can have actually achieve the vision of the CFTA.
It took Europe 45 years, and they're still not there yet. But let's hope that Africa learns from their mistakes.
I think we'll have to have this conversation again next year.
We'll have to do it like we did mobile, just jump faster.
Exactly. When we look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, a company like Water Access Rwanda is spot on. I mean, we see exactly how it's aligned with the SDGs. But of course, they're designed not only to include government efforts, it's everyone. So how can the private sector better align with the SDGs?
Okay, so when we look at the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, and I hope that we're all familiar with them, if we look at the ripple effect, so if an organization decides that they want to, like Rwanda Water Access, decide that water is obviously their goal that they're focusing on, it has a ripple effect, because what Rwanda Access is doing is, number one, they supplying the access to people, so they're addressing a societal issue. What they're also doing is that the women that used to have to walk, how long was it? 30.
So one woman would be 1 to 3 hours.
So the 3 hours, as Christelle was saying earlier on, this woman doesn't have to walk 3 hours now to go and get her water. She's now got free time to maybe try and find a job, which means that is more money in the community. So I can tell you the story of Mkopa. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It started off about 7 years ago. It's supply electricity via solar panels. It's a solar panel system that a family can buy. They pay it off over a period of 365 days. Attached to the solar panel is a cell phone charger. There's 3 LED lights. There's also now they've added that you can also buy televisions that you can add to it. So what happens in a case like that? The families that has been buying kerosene, which affects the people's health, the children's health when they were studying. So what has happened is that the family then saves on spending money on kerosene, which is, I think the last time when they looked at it, it was something like a family saves $18 a year. So that $18 a year goes back into the economy. So if we look at the Mkopa, they're not just supplying access to renewable energy. They also providing, it affects health, because now they're healthier. The children, they've looked at a study that 92% of the families that they've interviewed said that there's one family member whose health has improved. So it affects health. So they're making their money from a renewable energy perspective, but it improved people's health, and it also created also resulted in being more money in the economy. So the SDGs have a ripple effect, and you as an organization and us as an organization, you choose your material issue and you align it to one of the SDGs. There's no excuse for any organization to not align their business to the SDGs. And we have to do it, guys, because we have 2030 is not that far away. We have to address the sustainable development goals, because therein lies the opportunities.
How has using the shared value model made your company more innovative?
Let me say that for us, what it is we have seen is because we are in the space of solving problems, we have found ourselves constantly innovating a solution. I'll give a good example. As we started doing the work we are doing in the foundation, and we were in the space of agriculture with the young people, cognizant of the fact that there are big, 67% of the population is in the rural area, and you have a very youthful, community. But remember that those young people have no access to land, because they're still young. The land is in the hands of their fathers. First and foremost, they're not even attracted to farming at all, because what it is they have done is to see their parents struggle so much to put food on the table, through farming, hard and all that, and all the challenges of weather, the climate change. What we ended up doing is starting to think of then how do we grow food fast? How do we lure young people into agriculture? And then how do we grow food in small spaces? And we ended up finding ourselves, thinking about hydroponic farming. And hydroponic farming, for us, became a very big innovation. We struggle every day, with challenges of water, challenges of energy. And as we do the greenhouses, because now we are growing a lot of vegetables through the greenhouses, first and foremost, growing them vertically, because hydroponics allows us, to take advantage of the up space. And that way, you're dealing with the issues of the small land, spaces. We started realizing, we could also power them with the green, with the solar energy. And on and on as we solve the problem. Every day you encounter a problem, you solve it. And as you're trying to solve that problem, you become innovative. One of the things we are trying to do now is, as we design our greenhouses, we've also started putting the IT, the IT gadget that is able to collect all the data. So we are doing, the artificial intelligence that even allows us now to know how to, how to position them. But once again, thinking about how do we sustain all this, and immediately we innovatively thought, wait a minute, we are sequestrating a lot of carbon. In the greenhouses, we can now do carbon trading. And if we do the carbon trading and we are able, to get more resources, then we are able to give young people bonuses and do more and more. So in the space of the shared value, solving the problem, we find ourselves, becoming innovative every single day.
The shared value model is a problem-solving model. And it seems like everything works out. It's purpose, it's profit, it's everyone wins. But what are the challenges that come with using the shared value model?
Let me quickly point on the challenges. As I said, it's not a touch and go. It's patience. And you've got to do it intentionally, and you've got to do it for the long haul. And so some of the challenges is that you don't have a lot of patience, the patient capital. And for us, I keep saying, because I'm a development specialist, 30 years of development at USAID, looking at everything that we did. Now I'm in the corporate. It's the nexus of development and business, that sweet spot. And is realizing that then shared value is expensive. And because it's expensive, you must combine the resources of development and business. And so what it is, I always tell a business that is that shared value is a precursor to business. Or development is a precursor to business. Development will not succeed alone. That's why she's giving us the example of Haiti. That was development. That is NGO. And it's good, it's got its space. But it won't succeed alone without business. And business won't succeed without development, because development is also very, very expensive. And shared value is that sweet spot, the intersection of interest of the two. It's patient capital. And therefore, SDG 17 kicks in. You cannot do it alone. It's a part of partnership, it's a part of ecosystem. That's how you mitigate against that big challenge of especially the financing bit of it.
There's a lot of data that has to go into shared value. And you need to set up that infrastructure, which sometimes as a business, you'd rather just focus on the P&L and not look at all the other stuff. But again, I said it's an opportunity, because now as you quantify all of that data, it starts having more value, like the carbon savings. Then you create value from that. Or looking at how your product is helping improve the health and well-being of people. And now there is health bonds that are coming up to subsidize the impact that enterprises are having. Like the Rockefeller Foundation will pay you if you're actually improving people's lives. So there is an opportunity in quantifying that data, but it is expensive. It's an extra person that you need to have on your staff to actually measure that impact, control that you're actually having the desired results from your initiatives, and track all of that data. It is, I think that's a challenge, but there's also hidden opportunities once you actually do it.
And something maybe all companies should be doing anyway, huh?
Yeah.
Using the model or not. John, did you have?
Just, I'd like to echo really what's been said. Patience, definitely, unexpected complexity. As you try to address one issue, you find yourself confronted with things you never even thought of. I got an example from your country, from Kenya, where again we're working with coffee communities, and you start out by thinking, well, the goal should be about improving the income, and that way you improve the yield, you improve the reliability, you improve the quality. All of those things are absolutely fundamental. But then you get into some of the reasons and some of the challenges those communities face, and you find that nutrition security is a real issue in some communities, especially cash crop communities. So we've had to start systematically looking at and working on that, doing a baseline study on the nutrition security of those coffee communities, interventions such as kitchen gardens. We're extending it now over to Côte d'Ivoire, where we're thinking of using actually greenhouses, so thinking is very much aligned there. And then 3 years later, you go back and you see that the dietary diversity score really measurably improves. So, yes, but our organisation had to have the patience and the understanding to face all of those challenges as they came across, not just say, okay, we're just all about income.
Right. But then how does that relationship work when it comes to a company that needs to show results, needs to whether to investors or to shareholders, people want those fast returns. How does that balance work?
With difficulty? No. Look, our chairman often says to us that we have to be an and company rather than an or company. There aren't easy answers to this one. We are expected to deliver greater returns to shareholders every year, and we are expected by those 1.2 billion choice makers who choose our products every day. They expect us to perform our obligations and responsibilities towards that society that we serve. So again, it shouldn't necessarily be a trade-off. It doesn't have to be a trade-off. You do need to take the long-term view. It is possible. We have some examples that we've worked on. I come back to the breakfast cereal in Nigeria. That way, within a 7-year period, we reduced our dependence on imports. At the same time, as that brand has grown exponentially. So that's the kind of proof you then go to the investor and say, well, look, this occurred because we made a conscious investment in creating shared value. So you need, to build up your data. You need to build up your evidence, and that's what you go to the investment community. That's how you show the value of staying the course.
I just want to add, especially for the young entrepreneurs out there, if you start your company based on a shared value strategy, you won't have the problems of the shareholders, because you're going to attract the right shareholders with the right mindset, because that's the other thing as well. We're seeing the investment community is also changing, because they are now looking also, after the famous CEO letter that goes out from BlackRock every year to say to the investors that they have to look at the value that these organizations are creating. And I just spoke earlier this morning to somebody to talk about, if you have the time, go and look at this report that's just been published by Michael Porter. It talks about ESG fail. So if you want me to send it to you guys, I can send it to you, but it talks very specifically about the role that ESG play and also where does shared value fit into that.
I'd like to open the floor for questions. If anyone has any comments or questions for any of our speakers, go ahead and raise your hand and we can start taking questions. And it can be from the presentations that were made earlier or from anything that has been discussed now. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask before we move on?
Good morning and thank you. My name is Jean-Claude Mohire. So you told us in the presentation that KCB has supported more than 30,000 young people through its different program. So, and I'm wondering, and one of the program is called Igire here in Rwanda. How do you approach the young people? Where do you find them, and how do you support them? Is there any selection criteria? And tell us more about that. And also the other question, can you please share with us about one of the success stories here in Rwanda of maybe a young person? Because I believe that you provide the scholarship for them, and then after the scholarship, you provide consultancy services. How do you ensure that the skills they learned through the college are not enough for them maybe to get other extra skills from the KCB? And then the other question, the second question for Tiki. What's next? How does the Shared Values Initiative plan to adopt its business model to Rwandan organizations to support ours or maybe organization to achieve sustainability? Thank you.
Okay, so where to from here from a shared value perspective? So the reason why we're here in Rwanda, this is our first step, and this is how we tackle every country that we go into. So bearing in mind that we are a 3-year-old organization, we started off in South Africa, where we started with the same format, speaking to business about it, seeing which businesses are already involved in it, seeing which business are involved in it, but not calling it shared value, because that's also what a lot of businesses are already doing it. And as Christelle was saying, is that she didn't call it shared value when she came to our summit in 2017. So we're here in Rwanda because what we want to do in Rwanda is next year we have our Africa, the regional Africa Shared Value the Africa Shared Value Leadership Summit here in Rwanda in June, 4th and 5th next year, and I hope that you can all make it. So our strategy for Rwanda is, and this is what we're doing in Kenya at the moment, we create a working group within a country made up of some of the big organizations, and we try and pull young people into that as well. So from a working group perspective, our vision is for the working groups is that we, as a working group from a country perspective, will choose one issue, one challenge that we face as a country. And it will be collectively done by the working group. We're not dictating it. They would choose that issue. Then, as a collective, we'll set the measurable goals for them to use their networks, to use their supply chain, to use their partners, to be able to address that particular issue over a period of 3 years. So we want to do the same in Rwanda, but what we normally do is we want to have these type of platforms for the discussions. We then have the summit in June, and then we put the working group together to continue. And it is my vision to also have in every country the more senior working group, and then the young ones, where we put the young entrepreneurs together as well as a working group, and then to get them to come together to see how we can solve the issues that we have.
Jane, if you could briefly answer his question.
Yeah. All right, so ordinarily what we do is that we open up the opportunity to all the young people. What we do is that we use the media, call for, application. And because we execute the program through the branch network, we have about 250 branches. We tell them, are you interested in this? Go to the nearest branch, together with the, with the TVETs, because that's the TVET space. They make the application, then we sit, we have a selection criteria, we interview them, and we onboard them. And then because we do it annually and now we have additional fund, what happens is that those we don't take immediately, we put them in the waiting list. So it's usually, an open opportunity. In regard to what it is we are doing here in Rwanda, I have just signaled my colleague, Rosa, she could probably tell us. Soon after this, actually, I'm going to visit some of the businesses that we launched last year.
Thank you. I'm Rosette Mutoni. I'm the Corporate Communications Manager at KCB here in Rwanda, and I also oversee foundation activities. So here in Rwanda, the program began last year. We sponsored 100 students to study vocational skills, and 10 businesses were sponsored to start. Let me first say, if there are 10, doesn't mean there are 10 students, because they group up. So they're about 30, because they put themselves in groups. So this year, there are 200 students that we've sponsored, and will be graduating next month. So your question was that, what are the success stories that we have in Rwanda? Among the 10 that began this year, because they studied last year, so their businesses began this year. I'll give maybe
just
three.
one example.
Just one example.
Yeah, I think
Time.
Yes.
So we have one youth. She's called Janet. She does made in Rwanda products, and so she studied ICT as a vocational skill as well. So she uses people to help design and also promote her business online, social media. And so she's doing very well, and she now employs other youth who are not in the program. So for youth employment, it goes beyond just those who are selected. And then we have someone else, the second example, someone who studied also ICT. So now he does web designs and ICT solutions for small markets to be able to have the software to promote their businesses.
So I think after this panel, we'll also have some opportunity to speak individually as well. Let's take one more question. There was one here.
My name is Salma Musa. I'm a farmer and a businessman. It's very interesting listening to the panelists. And I have a general statement and a question to them. Let me start with Neso.
John from Nestle.
Yes. Your last statement was that you care for shareholder value. Your requirement for that shareholder value has dictated for a long time that Africa exports raw materials without them being processed. Name it coffee, tea, leaving us where we are just talking about shared value and corporate social responsibility without that percolating to the people where we would make changes. That goes for our oil that is not processed, the plants and everything like that. How do you reconcile the two? Let me go to the banker. Africa has its share of very poor people. The interest rates now are damaging to even the businesses. Of course, not for liquid. I'm from liquid and we are liquid, so that is not. I'm generalizing the statement. The question becomes, Grameen Bank, which you are familiar with in Bangladesh, was a good example where they do banking for the poor without any collateral. We have our share of the people. Why can't it work in Africa so that our people can also be bankable and banked? Because we seem to say that you can't bank because there is no money, yet there are some examples that have worked before.
Okay, so the first one I'd like to take is that we do have 24 factories on the continent that are transforming 2/3 of the raw materials they need into finished products. So we are adding value. It's not in every country that we manufacture and sell every single raw material that's grown there. But we do have a good track record. So, for example, in Côte d'Ivoire, we do have a Nescafé factory which processes and roasts and sells green coffee, and it's one of the only ones that's doing that. In neighbouring Ghana, we're transforming local cocoa into Milo, a chocolate-based drink. But there are many, many examples of where we are taking raw materials and adding value to them, so that they are, we're working with developing capacity with the farmers, but also buying from them and transforming that and adding value. It doesn't happen in every single case, but we have a very good track record so far, and we aim to get it better, and the way to do that is by working with farmers to improve quality. And I think, again, coming back to the Continental Free Trade Area, that should help us to be able to source from countries beyond where our factories are currently located as well. So that I'd like to stop there, maybe Jane.
So to your question, that's exactly what the foundation is doing. The space of incubating the young people and giving them the loans are 0%. So we incubate them, we give them, the first loan is 0%, we make them bankable, then we take them to the bank. So when they go to the bank, that's when they pay. The second loan is a loan that they therefore pay at a interest rate. And so essentially what the foundation is doing is so much the Grameen, the Grameen model in Bangladesh. Yeah.
I'd like to say thank you to our panelists for speaking with us on the topic today. And let's have a round of applause, actually, as we finish up.
That was a panel on the ins and outs of committing to the shared value business model to grow a company and, of course, create profit with purpose. My name is Makeda Mahadio, and this has been a CNBC Africa special.